Genocide.
The deliberate killing of a large number of people from a particular nation with the aim of destroying that nation or group. This is of course a tragic reality of history, and we should do everything we can to educate people and let people know about how terrible these atrocities are in the real world. But like most atrocities from the real world, you can do them in Minecraft with absolutely no problems at all, and that's why in today's video I wanted to guide you through the mobs, plants, and blocks that you can absolutely delete from your world by simply removing the entire existing stock and driving it to extinction, to use a more friendly word, because of course extinction is probably a lot more friendly for this video than genocide is, but it's the same concept just applied to nature. And let's take a mob which you cannot genocide, for example, the zombie. The only way to stop zombies from spawning is to remove every part of your world that is dark, and then they'll immediately be able to spawn in should a single torch or glowstone block be removed, meaning that effectively you can't ever have a true zombie genocide, but you can have a dragon egg genocide. There is just one dragon egg that ever spawns into your world. When you kill the dragon for the first time, she drops this egg, which as of now does not have a use. At some point in the future it might, although it's been 11 years. Come on, Mojang, what is the dragon egg for? But because you can remove this one dragon egg from existence by throwing it in a fire, or even just throwing it over the void, that will remove 100% of the dragon eggs that ever can legitimately spawn in your world. And so that is the easiest block in Minecraft to permanently remove. Once you remove the one dragon egg from your world, on purpose or not, it is gone forever. And so we're going to be going through all of the other blocks and mobs, which are just as easy to remove in the same way. It's going to be a long one, but by the end of it, you'll know the 41 separate mobs, plants, and items that you can fully drive to extinction. And let's start by talking about mobs, because I think this is the most interesting category. Did you know it's easy to not only remove all of the dragon eggs from your world, which aren't a mob but effectively are, but you can also remove all of the piglin brutes from your world, because they will only ever spawn once when a bastion generates for the first time. This means once you kill the piglin brutes inside a piglin bastion, there is no more of these mobs that can exist in that same bastion. And of course, across the entirety of the Nether, we're talking about hundreds or thousands of these, but the truth is you can remove all of the piglin brutes from your world by just going from every single bastion to every single other one and murdering them one by one. It's pretty brutal, but it's easy enough to do. And it's interesting because you can't do the same to the regular piglins, which are kind of the underlings to the piglin brutes, and the exact same thing applies to the oceans in a different dimension, because the Elder Guardian will spawn 3 times per ocean monument and never ever again. This is actually the source of many Minecraft bugs, because if you go into peaceful, should the Elder Guardians come back when you go up to easy? If they don't, you'll never have Elder Guardians, and you'll never have the mining fatigue effect, and all sorts of like gameplay issues arise from this. But yeah, Elder Guardians can only spawn in once when the world is created, and they'll spawn into every ocean monument, meaning if you visit every single one of these, then you can murder every Elder Guardian in existence and no more mining fatigue effect. Funnily enough, because of this, if you do remove all of the Elder Guardians from your world, you'll actually make Minecraft Java's hardest achievement, how did we get here, physically impossible to do. And I'm just saying, wouldn't that be worth the trek? Again, we're talking about huge journeys across the world with a 30 million by 30 million radius. You'll be doing that for a while, but the fact that you can genocide them from a local area and they'll never spawn back into that place is the interesting thing here. Kind of like the same thing, but a little bit different, is the shulker, which only spawns in end cities upon generation. I don't know why Minecraft has 3 separate mobs, one for each generation, which has this exact same effect of being very challenging to fight, but being able to be done so only once. But yeah, it's a thing they've done multiple times, and the shulker is the biggest problem, because killing the shulker will give you the shulker shells, so useful for the shulker box, the late game item, but because shulkers only spawn once, you need to go further and further and further out to find the shulkers, and so by accident, you're slowly driving them to extinction as it is. If you're a Java Edition player, you might know that 2 shulkers hitting each other with projectiles will allow them to reproduce, but if you go to every end city in advance of that and you kill all of these shulkers, then no longer will any generate, and it will be impossible to breed them, meaning no more shulker boxes, no more shulkers, and again, the how do we get here achievement becomes impossible once more. Speaking of impossible things, you also can do the same if you're going to the ocean monuments, or you're going to the end cities anyway. You can eliminate the dragon head, which is kind of dubious to call this a mob, but it is technically the head of a dragon, because when you use a charged creeper to blow up the ender dragon, it does not drop its own head, meaning they are non-renewable, they only spawn in the end cities, and the same is true for the sponge. Technically a block in Minecraft, but in the real world, sponges are a type of animal, which is horrifying to think about and look at. I don't like to do it. I don't know why I have this just weird vibe when I look at sponges in real life. Anyway, if you remove all of the sponges in a world, you cannot get them back. This takes a lot longer to do because you then have to burn them after collecting them all, but I would recommend trying to do this anyway, because having all of the sponges is a valuable thing. In fact, I went and gathered 1,000 sponges recently, and I effectively genocided them from my local area, from anyone who isn't called IBXTOYCAT at least. And so the final mob here, the hardest mob to genocide from your world, has to be the silverfish. The silverfish is a really hard one to drive to extinction, I think we should say, because the silverfish can spawn in 3 separate ways. The first one is there are spawner cages found in every stronghold end portal room. These strongholds get rarer and rarer as you go out, so it's actually relatively easy to remove all silverfish spawners from your world. However, they also spawn in the infested blocks, so you have to remove all of the stone brick blocks from the stronghold, just in case any of those are infested, and people could use these to find silverfish. But then on top of that, they also spawn in what are called blobs in the overworld in this set of biomes. It is a surprisingly big set that basically covers all of the mountains, but as a result of spawning in such big blobs so often in all of these biomes, which are very common all across your 30 million by 30 million world, you can remove every silverfish from your world, but I think it's outside the reasonable bounds of what a human being could do by hand. However, if you wanted to, if you had the time to mine out every single mountain-based biome in your world, as well as every single stronghold, you can remove silverfish from existence. Drive them to extinction, just like humans do with all good animals. You remember the dodo? Yeah, I don't remember the dodo, because he's gone. We drive some absurd number of species extinct every year, by the way. Gonna use this video to raise a little awareness for today's sponsor, the environment. Have you considered starting a forest fire? If so, you should reconsider, because animals don't like that. Speaking of things animals don't like, obviously they don't like being driven to extinction, but there are other things that you can remove from your world altogether too, and this next category is kind of miscellaneous things that didn't fit into any other category, but are very easy to get rid of in the grand scheme of things. Trust me when I say easy is in big air quotes, but it's still doable, because if you want to remove the snout and the thing banner patterns from your world, it's relatively easy to do. 10.1% of bastion chests contain the snout, which can only be found in these chests. So if you go to every single bastion in your world, you're trying to kill all the piglin brutes anyway, you can also remove every single version of the snout banner pattern. This means that you can make a snout banner and be the only one in the world that has this pattern, and you can use it in your specific way. And you can also do the same with the thing banner pattern, because the thing can be crafted, but it requires enchanted golden apples. Enchanted golden apples cannot be crafted and have to be found in dungeons, mine shafts, bastions, desert temples, ruin portals, and wooden mansions. If you go to every single one of those chests and you craft all of those into thing banner patterns, or you just eat them, then the thing banner pattern will no longer exist in your world. The same thing can be true for the OTHERSIDE and PIGSTEP music discs, because PIGSTEP only spawns in bastions, as you'll know, and OTHERSIDE only spawns in strongholds and dungeons. So if you go to every single stronghold and every single dungeon and every single bastion chest, and you check them for these music discs, and you either remove them, put them in a secret chest, or indeed burn them to make sure no one can ever take them, they will be gone from your world forever. There is no way to find a PIGSTEP disc if you can't find a new bastion, and if you've gone to every bastion in your world and checked every single chest, then no more PIGSTEP discs. Actually, an interesting thing here is that technically speaking, you could exist in a world where any of these 4 things have already been genocided, because they all only exist in those specific chests. And if we take PIGSTEP and OTHERSIDE, for example, OTHERSIDE can only be found in dungeon chests 3.1% of the time, and stronghold altar chests 2.5% of the time. It is theoretically possible that across your entire world, OTHERSIDE never spawns once, and the same is true for PIGSTEP in bastion chests with a 5.6% probability. Therefore, you could theoretically have a world where PIGSTEP is unobtainable, and you wouldn't know it until you tried to genocide it. I'm just saying, a little bit of a sales pitch right here. Also, cobwebs are only generated in mine shafts, strongholds, igloo basements, abandoned villages, and wooden mansions by the spawner rooms, meaning that if you go to each of those places, take away the cobwebs, you can make sure they don't exist any longer. The same is true for another useful block. I would argue the most useful thing that you can remove altogether from your world is the conduit, because although Nautilus shells can be traded for with the Wandering Trader, also you can get them from drowns as a drop. Heart of the Seas will only generate in the undersea chests, and they are non-renewable, meaning that if you want to craft conduits, which recipe involves the Heart of the Sea, it can only be done a finite number of times based on your Minecraft world. This makes them non-renewable, and therefore, what do we call it? Genocidable. Anyway, so that is the miscellaneous category. Before I bring you into our next category right here, I'd like to quickly take this moment to bring you to today's video sponsor. It's water. I mean, have you been thirsty recently? I bet you have been. I get thirsty all of the time too, and that's when I turn to my trusty friend, water. You know, in a world where things can be driven to extinction and before our eyes the only copy of something can be removed, that includes, by the way, everyone you love in your life. There's only one copy of them. If someone murders them, then that means that they're gone forever. But water, all you need is 2 buckets next to each other, and you've got an infinite source. And that means that water is impossible to drive extinct. That's right, you heard me correctly. You might be thinking, wait, but if you sponged up all the water in the world, which you couldn't do, by the way, if you removed all the sponges, but if you got rid of all the water in the world, surely you would have driven it extinct. You would have genocided the water, toy cat. But here's the thing, you can trade for buckets of fish with villagers, and villagers are infinitely renewable and there's no way to genocide them, and so therefore water is forever. Buy water right now and use code TOYCAT to get 10% off your nearest infinite fountain. But back to your originally scheduled content, let's talk about building blocks. So there are 3 building blocks which you can fully remove from your world. The first is tinted glass. Tinted glass can be made impossible to get because they require amethyst crystals. Amethyst crystals require you to have a geode with this specific block that grows the crystals, and if you don't have this block, you can't have crystals. If you don't have crystals, you can't have a spyglass, but you also can't have a tinted glass, which means that, yeah, tinted glass can be made impossible to gather. Red nether brick is also impossible in the same way because you can remove all of the nether wart from your world, and then once you do that, how's anyone ever gonna find the red nether brick recipe possible to do? They're not going to, that's the answer. And so then we've got the purple block as the third and hardest block set to genocide. Every single thing inside this set, by the way. So really this is 41 genocides, but we're counting all of the red nether brick collection and all of the purple block connection as just 1 each. But purple blocks only spawn in naturally to your world. You have to go all around the end city and you have to mine all of them, but then you'll have every single copy in existence. But I hear you thinking, oh no, toy cat, I think you're forgetting about the fact that you can craft purpur with popped chorus fruits, but if you also remove the chorus plants from existence, as we're about to mention, then you can remove these ones too. So yeah, this video is very vaguely going in order from like easiest to hardest. So funnily enough, it's actually gonna get a lot harder from here on out. But these 3, if you do the other genocides, they get a little bit easier to pull off. Speaking of things that are easy to pull off, that's right, it's the thumbsticks on any modern controller. Who wants a controller when the thumbstick will come off like this? And that's why today's video is sponsored by the Nintendo 64. You might think you've missed the boat on getting one of these, but trust me when I say that this is the world's best gaming controller. It has space for a memory card in the controller. We don't have design like this anymore, and that's why use code TOYCAT to get 10% off a Nintendo 64 controller somewhere probably. Try it, it might work. So this next category is a particularly fun one because these are the flora that you can remove from your world. You can actually make entire species of plants go extinct just by taking them up, and there is actually 6 of these. 5 if you're playing the Java edition though, it has to be worth mentioning, because although you can get rid of the glow berries on either Java or Bedrock by finding every single one of these in the lush caves, burning them, getting rid of them, doing something else with them, it's not my job to judge you, then you can do that with glow berries, but cocoa berries are only extinctable on the Java edition. If you want to know the reason why, it's because the only ways to find the cocoa beans is naturally in the jungles with the bamboo forests or just on the jungle trees themselves, unless you're playing Bedrock, in which case if you fish in the jungle, that's right, jungles have specific fishing drops in Bedrock, you can find cocoa beans, and also if you go to a wandering trader, they might sell free cocoa beans for an emerald, which means you can never truly extinct this item, this flora, on the Bedrock edition, but you can on the Java, and so yeah, more genocide is the real reason to play the Java edition, the only one I've found so far. Speaking of things I've found so far, you can also remove all of the dead bushes from your world, and this is something that I mentioned in a video back in 2015. I said that they were one of the best currencies you could find because dead bushes will only spawn in once and then never again, meaning if you shear them, then you have this access to a currency that can never be found once more. And obviously in the console edition, it was much easier to share all of the dead bushes in a world. In fact, every single one of these features in this video is much easier to do on a limited or old size world. I mean, those don't exist on Bedrock anymore, but if you had a limited world, you perhaps do those sorts of things. But it is still very easy to just go around and remove every dead bush from a very easy to get to area, making it easier for people to trade those dead bushes with you than it would be to go and find them naturally. Or if you take the entire world's dead bushes, then you can genocide them by burning it in a fire. Speaking of things you can burn in a fire, that sounds like a sponsored transition, doesn't it? And that's because it is. This video is sponsored by cooking. But no, the actual exciting thing is that you can also drive sweet sweet berry bushes to extinction because the exact same thing applies to them. They're found in the taiga biome, snow taiga, old growth pine taiga, and old growth spruce taiga, but if you remove all of the sweet berries from those biomes, then they will not spawn naturally. There is no other way to obtain them besides when they spawn in for the first time, and so they are gone. Enchanted golden apples, exactly the same thing I mentioned earlier, but also chorus plants, flowers, fruits, and pop fruits will only spawn in naturally into the end islands once. When you first load into your world, every single end island above about 1,000 coordinates will have a potential chance to have chorus plants on, meaning if you went around all of the end islands, which I'll admit is one of the most draining prospects I can imagine, you could fully remove chorus plants from existence, which would then help you also remove the purple blocks as well. That one's a little nutty even for me to imagine, but trust me when I say this video just gets harder. Speaking of things that just get harder, finding a plastic straw. It's really challenging, isn't it? I mean, you just want to drink your drink, and you want to do so without your mouth tasting like, you know, whatever paper's meant to be like. And metal straws, which are the clear solution to the, you know, the actual climate side of things and not putting plastic straws down animals' throats. It's just, for some reason, we're not adopting those. We're like, oh, we'd have to clean those. And it's like, you have to clean plates and forks, and we don't act like that's impossible. But things that aren't impossible is plastic straws. You can buy them by the hundreds online from China still, and even though they're illegal to give to you in restaurants, you can drink from as many of them as you want inside your own home. Plastic straws, buy them right now if you want to hate our other sponsor, the environment. Speaking of things you might hate, you can actually remove all of the fungi from your world as well, because mycelium, of course, only spawns on mushroom islands. Warped, never warped blocks only spawn in the warped forests. Never warped and never warped blocks only spawn in nether fortresses and crimson forests. And then, as you can probably imagine, everything from this kind of stems from those two things as well, because if you chop down every single crimson or warped wood tree, then you'll never be able to find those types of wood in the nether again. This is actually kind of not a design flaw, but it shows the prematureness of where the the nether trees are right now, because unlike the overworld trees where you can always find those saplings at some point in some chests from some trade, from some wandering trader, getting the nether trees back once you've chopped them all down is entirely impossible. And again, the world is so big that you'll never do this by accident. It is worth technically mentioning that yeah, you can fully remove those if you really want to, or if you had a nether that didn't ever have a crimson forest or a warp forest, you'd never be able to have access to any of these last three things. Speaking of things you wouldn't have access to, SHROOMLIGHTS. They also only spawn naturally with these trees, and you can only get these trees when you have the mushrooms that drop from them, or you have the, indeed, you have them naturally spawning. None of those trees means none of those SHROOMLIGHTS, and it also means no stem or hyphae blocks, because those are crafted from said wood blocks. Speaking of things you wouldn't be able to find, everything inside the warped forest and the crimson forest biomes are entirely impossible to obtain once those biomes have been removed from them. So fungus, obviously. There is the nether roots, of course, nether sprouts, and then the most tragic of all is twisted vines, one of Minecraft's most criminally underrated and useful items. You can remove all of them from your world by collecting all of them up and just burning them in a fire, and the same is true for weeping vines, which is Minecraft's most honestly underused block, right? Like, how often do you really want the weeping vine, especially when the twisted vine does exist? And then finally, the kind of reverse of mycelium being removable by just going to every mushroom biome, which is easy enough to do. You can remove every block of nylium in your world by going to every single crimson forest, mining the entire floor of those biomes, so none of it exists, then going to every warp forest, mining the entire floor of those biomes, and then on top of those things, you have to go to some bastion chests. Again, we're getting to the point of the video where things are getting a little bit ludicrous, but if you want things to be less ludicrous, maybe you'd appreciate a word from today's sponsor, leaving a nice comment. You know, there's a lot of comments on this video about the use of the word genocide and the fact that, like, oh, are you making light of a tragedy? No, you're making light of a tragedy by comparing the events. You know what you should do? You should go in those comment sections, just say something nice about how you're probably enjoying the video, or, because, you know, if you're 22 minutes into a video at this point, either you enjoy the video or you fell asleep and you're confused about what's happening. And if you're confused about what's happening, maybe leave a comment. Speaking of things you can do if you're confused, you can remove all of the fluids from your world, and by that I mean only one of those fluids, because as we mentioned, water is infinitely renewable, but lava is not. Although you can make infinite lava if you use pointed dripstone, as I've done myself, as I'm sure you have somewhere in your world. It's one of the most useful farms to have, in my opinion. You need lava to farm more lava. So do you hear what I'm thinking here? Lava will exist naturally as a block in your world. If you go go to every single lava lake and remove all of those lava blocks, and then you go to the stronghold and remove all of those lava blocks, and then you go to the nether, and yes, you remove all of those lava blocks, then you can make it so there is no longer lava in your world. The best furnace fuel can be driven to extinction. The way that I genuinely want to say that the striders won't spawn without lava, right? The way to transport around of striders at least can be entirely eliminated altogether. And yes, this is still not the worst genocide we're talking about in this video. Speaking of genocides, have you ever thought to yourself, wow, I'm about to commit a genocide, but I need a great mobile game to play? That's where today's sponsor, Raid Shadow Legends, comes in. Have you ever thought to yourself, I would like to play a game that looks like it's very good, and that's why it clearly needs to be advertised with such large budgets on YouTube where they have to pretend they enjoy the game? Well, then this is the game for you. Anyway, next up, the final category here is geology. So obviously at the bottom end of geology, we've got ancient debris and obviously netherite being entirely extinctable from your world, entirely genocidable. All you've got to do is mine every last ancient debris block. This is actually easier said than done, but at least it just requires mining all of the nether below a certain point, then going up to find the rest of the ancient debris, which will take you a long time because the nether is 30 million by 30 million blocks. In fact, it's estimated that it will take longer than a human lifetime just to do the easiest of these geology extinctions, but would be pretty funny to say, good luck finding any ancient debris. Next up is clay. Clay can be removed from your world altogether by just going to the bottom of every single ocean and then mining the blocks. Except, wait a minute, caves and cliffs update. That means you also have to go to every lush cave and mine all of the clay blocks from there too. We're talking about genuinely tens of millions across your world, probably hundreds of millions, but you can remove all of the clay in existence. And if you remove all of the clay in existence, you can also get rid of all the terracotta by after mining all of those tens of millions of clay blocks, going and finding a mesa biome and then destroying all of their blocks too. That seems very intense. That seems like a lot of work. But again, we've still got another 10 genocides that are harder because amethyst blocks are a very hard one. You need amethyst bud blocks to get amethyst. And so if you go to every single amethyst geode in your world, which are hidden deep in the ground at random points, it's hard to do without a map. And with a map, it's still very hard to do. You could remove all of the buds and there will be no more shiny things for you to collect. The 9th hardest is going to be diamond ore. In fact, you can say this about every single ore. Coal, diamond, emerald, iron, gold, copper ore, and deepslate variants. The ore blocks themselves will only generate naturally in the world. There is no way to trade for the ore. There is no way to renew the ore blocks. They exist once and then never again. And that is a crazy fact that you can never really run into as a natural survival player. You used to be able to, in the old size console worlds, theoretically mine all the diamonds, but in reality, no one ever did. And so with a world that is, bear in mind, those console worlds were 800 by 800, or 864 by 864, I should say. That means that a Minecraft Bedrock world is literally 30,000 by 30,000 times larger. That's I think about 9 million, if I'm doing the maths correctly. And so yeah, that's how much you're gonna have to go through. But you can theoretically remove all of those blocks and their deep slate variants. So remove all of the ores from your world. How are there 7 more of these that are harder to do? The raw versions of each of those blocks is of course just as tricky. So raw iron, raw copper, raw gold, and then nether quartz, gilded blackstone, and nether gold ore. These are the 3 separate ore blocks that exist in the nether. They only spawn in. You can never find the blocks. Again, you can infinitely renew nether quartz, but nether quartz ore cannot be. Same with nether gold, and same with gilded blackstone. But it gets crazier because now we've got the top 5 we're going to end the video on. So can you guess what the 5 blocks which can be genocided in Minecraft are, but yet are the hardest to remove from the game? Make your guesses right now, because if you guessed diorite, granite, and andesite, you've got a good one. They are number 5 on our list. You would have to go underground. You'd have to find every single patch off each of those blocks, and you'd have to mine those individual patches. And so that would require going basically underground at every single point in your world, and then finding each of those, mining those, and then burning them. And then on top of that, you would have to genocide the nether quartz ore anyway, because they can be crafted. But oh no, you can still get quartz from the traders. So you'd actually need to genocide cobblestone anyway, which actually makes this probably the hardest one, because it's like an additional thing. But it gets harder than this because DEEPSLATE, the entirety of the DEEPSLATE layers in your world, if you mine it all, there's no other way to get DEEPSLATE as of yet. So do you want to mine the entirety of your world below Y0? I bet you do. And if you do that, there'll be no more DEEPSLATE left. NETHERRACK, you know that block the entire Nether is made out of? If you mine all of the NETHERRACK in a world, you can't trade for any more. It's just gone. Never exists again. Second of all, we've got endstone. So endstone and endstone brick. You know the block that end is made out of? You need to mine your end so that there is nothing left but the obsidian pillars in the center. And if you do that, which I cannot even imagine the length of times we're talking. We're talking thousands of human being lifetimes now. But if you did it, there'd be no endstone left. And so the final example here is the fact that stone and cobblestone, you know, the fundamental basis of our Minecraft worlds. If you go through and you mine every block underneath the ground, that includes mountains, that includes everything above Y0 to where the surface is, then there would be no more stone and no more cobblestone. This means that you could actually make sure there are no more furnaces, because although furnaces generate naturally, let's be honest, if you're mining the entire world above Y0, then you could probably mine the furnaces that spawn in the villages. And yeah, long story short, what I'm trying to say is that you can theoretically, you know, if you put your mind to something, you can do anything, including genocide in Minecraft. And obviously, it has to be worth mentioning, this video did not include the glitches, the bugs, did not include blocks generated by a portal, did not include the really specific craftable items, because sure, if you you know, remove all the wood, you remove all the diamonds, you could make the jukebox uncraftable. There are all sorts of other specifics like that, but this is just the things you can get rid of in order of most genocidable to least genocidable. And yeah, I hope this encourages you to stick to your mind and achieve anything you want to. In reality, the vast majority of this isn't possible, but it does hopefully start an interesting conversation about renewability. Because in Minecraft, there's two types of blocks. Like we mentioned, there's the cows that will spawn in and over again as long as you have grass. And then there is the silverfish, which only spawn in once. Should every Minecraft mob and block be renewable? Or in other words, should every mob be ungenocidable, or should it be the opposite? Should there actually be a certain degree of rarity to things that can't be replicated? I mean, if you don't find sponges in a ocean monument, you can't find them any other way. Is that good game design, or should there be multiple ways to everything in Minecraft? This is an interesting question I'm going to leave to the comments. Thank you for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed. Took obviously a bit of time to put together, to research, to order. Obviously, we had to secure those sponsors for this video. And if you enjoyed it, make sure to like the video and let me know. Share if you really liked it, and maybe subscribe with notifications turned on if you want to see more of these, because I'll see you in the next one, probably. Goodbye.